The handcuffs catch the morning light streaming through the Silver Star Diner's chrome-framed windows. Officer Holloway's boots echo against cracked linoleum as he approaches the counter where Garrick wipes down the same spot for the third time. His daughter Sloane pressed close to his side. "Garrick Washington," Holloway says, removing his cap. "We need to talk." The coffee pot trembles in Garrick's grip. Steam rises from fresh grounds as he sets it down with deliberate care. His movements are measured, controlled, the way a man acts when everything depends on staying calm. Sloane's small fingers clutch his apron strings. "About what happened last night?" Garrick's voice stays steady despite the storm building in his chest. Officer Reed steps forward, notebook already open. "The woman who came in here. Describe her again." The diner feels smaller suddenly. The red vinyl booths seem to close in. Outside, Elizabeth's industrial skyline blurs behind rain-streaked glass. Garrick can smell the grease from yesterday's shift still clinging to his clothes, mixed with Sloane's strawberry shampoo from this morning's rushed hair-braiding session. Scared, hungry, human. Each word comes out like a nail being hammered. "That's all I saw." Holloway exchanges a look with Reed. Something passes between them, information Garrick isn't supposed to understand yet. The officer reaches into his jacket pocket, not for handcuffs, but for a photograph. "Take a look at this." The image shows a woman in an expensive business suit, hair perfectly styled, standing beside a gleaming corporate logo. The face is familiar, but cleaned up. Professional. Powerful. Garrick's blood turns cold. "Do you know who you fed last night, Garrick?" The question hangs in the air like smoke from the grill. Sloane tugs at his apron, sensing the shift in the room's energy. Her wide eyes dart between the officer's and her father's face, reading the tension adults think children can't see. "Daddy?" she whispers. Garrick stares at the photograph. The coordinates tattooed on the woman's wrist flash through his memory. Numbers he'd assumed meant nothing. The way she'd whispered those digits before disappearing into the storm. The burner phone he'd found in the trash afterward. Screen cracked but still glowing with unread messages. His late wife's hospital ID card is still missing from the drawer where he keeps her things. Rain hammers the diner's roof like angry fists. The storm arrived 3 hours ago, turning Elizabeth streets into rivers that reflect neon signs and headlights. Inside the Silver Star, the Tuesday night regulars hunker down over coffee and pie, their voices mixing with the hiss of the grill. Sterling Vance occupies the corner booth like a king holding court. His Armani suit looks out of place among the factory workers and night shift nurses. Manicured fingers tap against his phone screen as he conducts business in clipped sentences that slice through the diner's warmth. "The zoning approval comes through Friday," he says into the device. "Then we can start clearing out the garbage." Garrick flips burgers behind the counter, each sizzle punctuating Sterling's conversation. The developer has been coming here for weeks, buying nothing but black coffee while he plots the diner's destruction. Luxury condos will replace everything: the Silver Star, Murphy's Auto Shop, even the community center where Sloane takes art classes. Thunder shakes the windows. The door chime rings once, sharp and desperate. Everyone looks up as a figure stumbles inside, soaked to the bone. The young woman's jeans are torn at both knees, her gray sweater hanging loose and shapeless. Water drips from her hair onto worn sneakers that squelch against the floor. She stands there swaying, one hand pressed against the doorframe for support. Her skin has the gray pallor of someone who hasn't eaten in days. Dark circles ring her eyes like bruises. Sterling's conversation stops mid-sentence. He stares at the newcomer with the expression of a man who's found a roach in his soup. "Jesus Christ," he mutters, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "What kind of establishment are you running here, Washington?" The woman, barely more than a girl, really takes one unsteady step forward. Her legs give out. She catches herself against the nearest table, sending salt and pepper shakers clattering to the floor. Garrick moves around the counter without thinking. His hands reach for her shoulders, steadying her weight. Up close, he can see the exhaustion carved into her features. But there's something else, intelligence burning behind the fatigue. This isn't just another homeless kid looking for a handout. "Ma'am? You okay?" She looks up at him with eyes the color of storm clouds. When she speaks, her voice is barely a whisper. "I just need somewhere warm. Please." Sterling slams his coffee cup down hard enough to crack the saucer. "Get this animal out of here, or I'll have the health inspector shut you down by noon." Sterling's voice cuts through the diner like a blade. He's standing now, pointing one manicured finger at the young woman like she's contaminated. His face twists with disgust that seems too intense for the situation. Too personal. The other customers shift uncomfortably. Old Mrs. Chun from the laundromat clutches her purse tighter. Jimmy Rodriguez, still in his factory coveralls, looks between Sterling and Garrick like he's watching a tennis match where someone might die. Garrick feels the familiar weight of a choice settling on his shoulders. The same weight he carried when he walked away from his six-figure salary. When he chose Sloane's bedtime stories over board meetings. When he decided integrity mattered more than money. "Sterling," he says quietly, "why don't you finish your coffee?" "Don't you Sterling me." The developer's face flushes red above his silk tie. "I'm trying to eat in peace, and you're letting vagrants wander in off the street. This is exactly why this whole neighborhood needs to be raised." The young woman flinches at the word vagrants like she's been slapped. She's still leaning against the table, water pooling beneath her feet. Garrick notices her hands, soft, uncalloused. Not the hands of someone who's been living rough for long. "You want to call someone?" Garrick asks her gently. "Family? Friends?" She shakes her head. "There's no one." Something in her voice breaks his heart. It's not self-pity. It's fact, delivered with the kind of acceptance that comes from having your world ripped apart. Garrick walks back behind the counter. He pulls out a to-go container and starts loading it with the house special. Braised beef that's been slow cooking since morning, mashed potatoes still steaming, green beans that snap with freshness. He adds a dinner roll, still warm from the oven, and a slice of apple pie that Mrs. Chun brought in earlier. "What the hell are you doing?" Sterling demands. Garrick doesn't answer. He grabs his late wife's windbreaker from the hook by the kitchen door. Navy blue with Memorial Hospital Volunteer embroidered on the chest. He walks around the counter and places both items in the young woman's trembling hands. "Hunger doesn't have a zip code, Sterling," he says without looking back. "And in this diner, the only thing that's trespassing is your attitude." The container is warm against her palms. She stares at it like she can't believe it's real. When she looks up at Garrick, tears mix with the rainwater on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispers. As she turns toward the door, Garrick notices something that makes his pulse quicken. On her left wrist, barely visible beneath the sleeve of her sweater, is a small tattoo. Numbers. Coordinates. 40.6635 degrees north, 74.2208 degrees west. The black SUV idles in the parking lot like a predator waiting to strike. Its tinted windows reflect the diner's neon sign, turning the cheerful red and blue letters into something that looks almost menacing. The engine purrs with the quiet confidence of expensive machinery. Garrick watches from behind the register as the young woman, she never gave her name, hurries across the wet pavement. The windbreaker is too big for her small frame, making her look even more fragile against the storm. She glances back once through the rain-streaked window, and their eyes meet for a split second before she disappears into the industrial maze of Elizabeth's back streets. "You just made a very expensive mistake," Sterling says, sliding his phone into his jacket pocket. His coffee sits untouched, growing cold. "That girl could be carrying anything. Drugs, disease. Do you have any idea what kind of liability you've just created?" Garrick continues wiping down the counter, each circular motion deliberate and calm. "I gave food to someone who was hungry. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal in New Jersey. It is when it affects property values." Sterling's smile has no warmth in it. "I've already made 3 calls. Health Department, Zoning Board, and my attorney. By Friday, this place will be nothing but a memory." The threat hangs in the air between them. Garrick has heard variations of it before. Sterling has been circling the Silver Star like a vulture for months. But something about tonight feels different, more urgent, like Sterling is working against a deadline that has nothing to do with real estate development. Thunder rolls overhead as the last customer pays his check and heads for the door. Mrs. Chun pats Garrick's hand before leaving, her wrinkled fingers surprisingly strong. "You did good tonight, Mijo," she says in her mixture of Spanish and English. "Your wife would be proud." After she's gone, Garrick locks the door and starts his closing routine. Grill off, coffee pot cleaned, cash drawer balanced to the penny. The familiar motions help calm the anxiety that's been building in his chest since the officers showed up this morning. That's when he finds it. Outside by the dumpster, half hidden under a soggy newspaper, a cracked smartphone blinks with unread messages. The screen is spider-webbed but still functional. Garrick picks it up with a dish towel, careful not to leave fingerprints. 3 text messages, all from the same number. 11:47 p.m. Package lost in Elizabeth. Terminate on site. 11:52 p.m. Silver Star Diner. 42nd and Industrial. 12:03 a.m. Cleanup crew en route. Garrick's hands shake as he reads the words again. Package. Terminate. Cleanup crew. The coordinates on the young woman's wrist suddenly make horrible sense. The emergency shelter's magnetic card reader beeps softly in the pre-dawn darkness. Cordelia Harrington slides the hospital ID through the slot again, praying the old authorization codes still work. The card is worn smooth from years in a dead woman's wallet, but the magnetic strip holds. Click. The door opens. She slips inside the downtown facility, her borrowed windbreaker still damp from the storm. The shelter is quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of someone crying in one of the back rooms. Cordelia has never been in a place like this. All institutional green walls and the smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with human desperation. 3 days ago, she was reviewing quarterly reports in a corner office overlooking Manhattan. Tonight, she's grateful for a cot and a chance to disappear among the invisible people her former world pretends don't exist. The intake worker barely looks up from her paperwork. First time. Yes. ID. Cordelia slides the hospital card across the desk, hoping her hands don't shake. The worker scans it into the computer system, and for a moment, Cordelia's heart stops. If the ID triggers any kind of alert, if anyone is monitoring old access codes. Says here you're Sarah Washington, volunteer coordinator. The worker hands back the card. Rough night. Something like that. The cot is thin and the blanket smells like industrial bleach, but it's warm and safe. Cordelia lies awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of people who have nowhere else to go. 3 days ago, she thought she understood poverty. She donated to charities, served on hospital boards, wrote checks that made her feel virtuous. She never understood that hunger has a taste, metallic and sharp, like pennies dissolving on your tongue. That exhaustion can make your bones feel hollow. That terror can live in your chest like a second heartbeat. The braised beef from the diner was the first real meal she'd eaten since running. The kindness of the man who gave it to her, Garrick, she heard someone call him, burns in her memory brighter than the food. He looked at her like she was human, not a problem to be solved or a threat to be eliminated. Outside, a car engine idles in the parking lot. Then another. Cordelia sits up on the cot, every muscle tense. Through the small window, she can see the outline of two black vehicles. Professional, patient, wrong. Her board of directors found the shelter. The magnetic strip on the old ID must have triggered something after all. Cordelia grabs the windbreaker and moves toward the emergency exit, keeping low and quiet. The other residents are still sleeping, unaware that death just pulled into their parking lot. She's 3 blocks away when she hears the gunshot echo through Elizabeth's industrial district. A single crack of sound that cuts through the pre-dawn silence like a period at the end of a sentence. Someone just died because she'd been there. The coordinates tattooed on her wrist burn like a brand. 40.6635 degrees north, 74.2208 degrees west. The location of the Silver Star Diner, where a kind man with gentle hands gave her hope when she had nothing left. She's brought death to his doorstep, and he doesn't even know it yet. She's not a runaway, Garrick. She's the woman who owns the hospital your wife passed away in. Officer Halloway's words hit like a physical blow. The photograph trembles in Garrick's hands as the pieces slam together with devastating clarity. The soft hands that didn't match homelessness. The intelligence burning behind exhausted eyes. The coordinates tattooed on her wrist. Not random numbers, but a breadcrumb trail leading back to his diner. Sloane pulls at his apron strings, sensing the shift in her father's energy. The morning coffee grows cold on the counter as Garrick stares at the corporate headshot. Dr. Cordelia Harrington, CEO of Harrington Healthcare Trust. The same trust that owns Memorial Hospital, where his wife spent her final months fighting cancer. That's impossible. His voice sounds hollow even to himself. She was hungry, scared. She had nothing. Officer Reed flips through his notebook, pages rustling in the sudden silence. 3 days ago, Dr. Harrington discovered a massive embezzlement scheme within her board of directors. Millions meant for pediatric cancer research were being funneled into offshore accounts. The words blur together like rain on windows. Garrick's mind races back to the night before. The way she'd whispered those coordinates, the burner phone in the trash, the text messages about cleanup crews. The hospital ID card he'd tucked into her food container, his late wife's volunteer badge that still carried active security clearances. They staged an accident to silence her, Halloway continues. Car ran her off Route 95 in Maryland. She survived, but her security detail didn't. She's been running ever since, staying off grid, blending in with people nobody pays attention to. The diner feels like it's spinning. Garrick grabs the counter for support, his knuckles white against the chrome surface. Everything he thought he knew about last night reshapes itself into something far more dangerous. The coordinates, he says quietly. She was marking safe locations. Reed nods. Smart woman. She knew they'd track her credit cards, her phone, any official identification. So she disappeared into the shadows, using the kindness of strangers to stay alive. Outside, Sterling Vance's black Mercedes pulls into the parking lot with predatory precision. The developer steps out, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits who move like corporate sharks circling wounded prey. Legal briefcases gleam in the morning sun. Mr. Washington, Halloway says, his voice taking on new urgency. What you did last night, feeding her, giving her that ID card, you saved her life. The magnetic strip triggered a silent alarm at a secure federal facility. That's how we found her. Sloan tugs harder at his apron. Daddy, are the police taking us away? Garrick lifts his daughter onto his hip, her small arms wrapping around his neck like a lifeline. Through the window, he watches Sterling approach the diner entrance with the confidence of a man who believes he's already won. The door chime rings once, sharp and final. Sterling Vance enters the Silver Star like a conquering army of one. His Italian leather shoes click against cracked linoleum as he surveys the scene. 2 police officers, a shaken diner owner, and a little girl who stares at him with eyes too wise for her age. Officers, he says with practiced authority. Perfect timing. I'm here to serve eviction papers on this establishment. He pulls a thick manila envelope from his briefcase. Legal documents that represent months of careful maneuvering through zoning boards and city council meetings. The papers that will transform the Silver Star into luxury condominiums by Christmas. Mr. Vance, Officer Reed says, his voice carrying a weight that makes Sterling pause mid-gesture. We need to discuss your connection to the Harrington Healthcare Trust. The envelope freezes halfway to the counter. Sterling's confident smile flickers like a neon sign losing power. I'm sorry, what connection would that be? Holloway steps forward, his hand resting casually on his radio. Your firm, Vance Development, has been receiving payments from shell companies tied to the embezzlement investigation. Large payments, Mr. Vance. The kind that buy silence and cooperation. The blood drains from Sterling's face, leaving him pale beneath his expensive tan. His eyes dart toward the door, but Reed has already moved to block the exit. The legal briefcase slips from nerveless fingers, hitting the floor with a sound like a gavel falling. That's ridiculous, Sterling says, but his voice cracks on the words. I'm a legitimate businessman. I develop properties, not whatever you're suggesting. Garrick watches the confrontation unfold with growing understanding. The pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he was solving click into place with mechanical precision. Sterling's obsession with buying the diner. His anger at seeing Cordelia last night. The way he demanded she be removed with the fury of someone whose carefully laid plans were suddenly threatened. The woman who came in here last night, Garrick says quietly. You knew who she was. Sterling's laugh sounds forced, artificial. I have no idea what you're talking about. I saw a vagrant and wanted her removed from a place of business. Anyone would have done the same. Anyone wouldn't have made 3 phone calls to have the diner shut down within hours. Reed observes, consulting his notebook. We checked your phone records, Mr. Vance. Very interesting conversations with some very interesting people. Sloan shifts in Garrick's arms, her small voice cutting through the tension. Daddy, why is the mean man scared? Children see truth adults try to hide. Sterling's fear radiates from him like heat from a broken radiator. Visible, desperate, and impossible to ignore. His manicured hands shake as he reaches for his phone, then thinks better of it. You want to know the real connection? Holloway continues. Your brother Marcus Vance sits on the Harrington Healthcare Board. Same board that's been stealing money meant to save children's lives. The revelation hits the room like a physical force. Sterling staggers backward, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume that no longer fits. The confidence he'd worn like armor crumbles, leaving behind a man who built his empire on other people's suffering. She was supposed to die in that car accident, Reed says, his voice cold as winter rain. But she survived, and now she's talking to federal investigators. Funny how that changes everything. Outside, more vehicles arrive. Black SUVs with government plates and men who move with the purposeful efficiency of people who clean up messes for a living. Not Sterling's kind of cleanup crew, but the kind that serves justice instead of covering it up. Sterling looks through the window at his approaching doom, then back at Garrick with the desperate fury of a cornered animal. "This is all your fault," he snarls. "If you just called the police like any normal person." "Like any normal person," Garrick interrupts. "I fed someone who was hungry. Get this trash out of here before it contaminates the entire neighborhood." Sterling's voice cracks with desperation as federal agents stream through the diner's entrance, their badges gleaming like small suns in the morning light. He throws the eviction papers onto the grease-stained counter with theatrical force, but the gesture looks pathetic now. A child throwing a tantrum when the game is already over. Agent Keisha Morrison leads the procession, her presence commanding immediate attention. She moves through the Silver Star with the efficiency of someone who has dismantled criminal enterprises before breakfast. Behind her, a forensics team carries equipment that will turn Sterling's carefully constructed lies into evidence. "Mr. Vance," Morrison says, her voice carrying federal authority, "you might want to read the back of those papers. There's been a change in property ownership." Sterling's hands shake as he flips through the legal documents. The color drains from his face as he reads words that don't make sense in his carefully ordered world. Transfer of deed. Harrington Healthcare Trust. Community preservation status. "That's impossible," he whispers. "I own the purchase agreements, the zoning approvals, everything." Morrison produces a tablet, swiping through financial records that glow like accusations in the fluorescent light. "Your purchase agreements were funded by embezzled money, Mr. Vance. Money stolen from pediatric cancer research. Every transaction is now evidence in a federal investigation." Garrick watches the confrontation unfold while holding Sloane close to his chest. His daughter's small hands cover her ears, but her eyes remain wide and alert. Children understand justice even when they can't name it. The diner door chimes again, and Cordelia Harrington enters wearing clothes that actually fit. Dark jeans, a clean sweater, and the quiet confidence of someone who has reclaimed her power. The exhausted vagrant from last night has transformed back into a CEO, but her eyes still hold the memory of hunger and fear. She walks directly to Sterling, who recoils like she's carrying a contagious disease. "Hello, Sterling," she says quietly. "Surprised to see me alive?" The question hangs in the air like smoke from the grill. Sterling's mouth opens and closes without sound, his brain struggling to process the resurrection of someone who was supposed to be permanently silenced. "The coordinates you had tattooed," Morrison explains to the room. "They led us to 3 secure facilities where Dr. Harrington hid evidence of the embezzlement. Bank records, wire transfers, audio recordings of board meetings. Everything we need to prosecute everyone involved." Sterling makes a desperate lunge for the door, but federal agents move like water around him, cutting off every escape route with professional precision. His Italian leather shoes slip on the linoleum as handcuffs click into place with the finality of a closing book. "You don't understand," he pleads, his voice rising to a near scream. "I have friends in high places, people who will make sure this disappears." "People who? People like your brother Marcus?" Morrison interrupts. "He's already in federal custody, singing like a canary about offshore accounts and murder-for-hire schemes." The words hit Sterling like physical blows. His legs give out, and he sags against the agents holding him upright. The man who had threatened to destroy the Silver Star now looks like he can barely stand under the weight of his own crimes. Cordelia approaches Garrick, her movement careful and respectful. When she speaks, her voice carries the warmth of genuine gratitude, mixed with something that sounds like wonder. "You saved my life," she says simply. "When I had nothing, when everyone wanted me dead, you gave me food and kindness. You saw me as human when the world wanted me erased." Sloane peeks out from behind her father's shoulder, studying this woman who looks so different from the scared stranger who stumbled through their door 12 hours ago. "Are you the lady Daddy helped?" She asks with childhood's direct honesty. Cordelia smiles, the first real smile she's worn in days. "Yes, sweetheart. Your daddy is a hero. The federal warrant executes with surgical precision." Agent Morrison's team moves through Sterling's financial records like archaeologists uncovering layers of buried corruption. Bank statements spread across the diner's tables like maps to a criminal empire built on stolen hope and murdered dreams. $17 million, Morrison announces, reading from her tablet. "That's how much your brother's board diverted from pediatric cancer research over the past 3 years. Money that could have saved hundreds of children's lives." Sterling sits handcuffed in a booth, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained with sweat. The man who entered the Silver Star like a conquering king now looks like what he always was, a parasite feeding on other people's suffering. Cordelia stands beside Garrick, no longer hiding behind the mask of helplessness that kept her alive. Her transformation is complete, but she hasn't forgotten the taste of hunger or the weight of desperation. When she looks at the evidence of her board's crimes, her eyes burn with righteous fury. "The Harmony Children's Hospital," she says, pointing to one of the financial documents. "That was supposed to be built 2 years ago. 300 beds for kids fighting cancer. Instead, Marcus and his friends bought yachts and vacation homes." The words hit Garrick like physical blows. His wife spent her final months at Memorial Hospital, fighting for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Money that could have saved her was sitting in Sterling Vance's brother's offshore accounts, while families like his watched their loved ones die from treatable diseases. Sloane squirms in his arms, sensing the adult emotions swirling around her like storm winds. "Daddy, are you sad?" He kisses the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "No, baby. Daddy's proud. We helped catch the bad guys." Morrison approaches Sterling with a fresh set of documents, each page representing another nail in his legal coffin. "Your construction company received 12 separate payments from shell corporations tied to the embezzlement. You knew exactly where that money came from." "I never asked questions," Sterling protests, his voice weak and desperate. "Business is business. I just developed properties." "Properties built with blood money," Cordelia says, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has stared death in the face and survived. "Every luxury condo, every shopping center, built on the graves of children who died because you and your brother stole their chance at life." The federal team works with quiet efficiency, photographing evidence and cataloging crimes that span multiple states and several years. The Silver Star Diner, once threatened with destruction, has become the epicenter of justice for families who thought they'd never see it. Agent Morrison's radio crackles with updates from other arrest teams. Marcus Vance is in custody. Dr. Patricia Wells from the board in custody. CFO David Chun in custody. We're rolling up the entire network. Sterling's face crumbles as each name is announced. The conspiracy he thought was bulletproof dissolves like sugar in rain, leaving him isolated and exposed. His phone buzzes with increasingly desperate calls from lawyers and accomplices who don't yet know their own arrests are imminent. "The beautiful thing about financial crimes," Morrison explains conversationally, "is that criminals always leave paper trails. Bank transfers, wire records, email communications. Every transaction creates evidence." Cordelia pulls out her own phone, scrolling through restored access to accounts and systems that were stripped away during her flight. With a few taps, she executes transfers that reverse months of careful theft. $17 million, she announces, just returned to the Harmony Children's Hospital Fund. Construction begins next month. The diner falls silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of Sterling Vance quietly weeping into his handcuffs. Justice tastes different than revenge. Cleaner, more satisfying, with the weight of rightness that settles deep in the chest. Outside, news vans begin arriving as word of the arrests spreads through Elizabeth's tight-knit community. The Silver Star Diner, scheduled for demolition 12 hours ago, is about to become the most famous restaurant in New Jersey. Morrison approaches Garrick with a final document, not an arrest warrant, but something that looks like a deed. "Dr. Harrington has a gift for you," she says. "Consider it payment for services rendered to truth and justice." The Silver Star Diner's neon sign flickers to life in the evening dusk, casting red and blue light across freshly cleaned chrome and polished windows. 6 months have passed since the morning federal agents arrested Sterling Vance, and the transformation extends far beyond fresh paint and new equipment. Garrick stands behind the counter, watching Sloane complete her homework at the corner booth. Her math worksheet lies next to acceptance letters from 3 different private schools, all paid for by the Harrington Educational Trust. She could attend any of them, but she insists on staying at Jefferson Elementary with her friends. "Daddy, Mrs. Chun wants to know if you need help with the dinner rush," Sloane calls out, looking up from long division problems. The dinner rush. 6 months ago, the Silver Star served coffee and basic meals to factory workers and night shift nurses. Now, people drive from Manhattan to eat at the diner where kindness changed everything. The waiting list for weekend reservations stretches 3 weeks into the future. Cordelia enters through the front door, no longer hiding behind torn clothes and desperate exhaustion. She wears simple jeans and a Harrington Healthcare Trust sweater, but her eyes still carry the memory of what it means to be invisible. Every Tuesday evening, she volunteers at the shelter downtown, serving meals to people who remind her that dignity isn't determined by bank account balances. "How's the new community center coming along?" Garrick asks, refilling her coffee cup without being asked. "Ribbon cutting is next month," she says, spreading architectural drawings across the counter. "Art classes, job training, childcare services. Everything this neighborhood needs to thrive instead of just survive." The drawings show a building that will rise where Sterling Vance's luxury condominiums were supposed to stand. The lot sits empty now, tied up in federal asset forfeiture proceedings that will eventually transfer ownership to the community it was meant to destroy. Officer Halloway enters, hanging his cap on the hook by the door with the familiarity of someone who belongs. The Silver Star has become his unofficial headquarters for community policing, a place where neighbors solve problems together instead of calling for backup. "Sterling Vance got 25 years, he announces, settling into his usual booth. "His brother Marcus got 30. Federal judge said their crimes represented a fundamental betrayal of society's most vulnerable members. The news settles over the diner like warm sunlight. Justice moves slowly, but it moves with the weight of permanence. Children who would have died from treatable cancers will live because stolen money found its way back to research and treatment." Mrs. Chun enters carrying a covered dish that fills the air with the smell of homemade tamales. At 83, she's become the Silver Star's unofficial grandmother, bringing food and wisdom in equal measure. "Mijo," she says to Garrick, "you remember what you told me that night? About integrity being what you do when no one is watching." He nods, remembering the conversation from what feels like another lifetime. "The whole world was watching," she continues, her voice soft with pride. "And you showed them what a real man looks like." The diner fills slowly with the Tuesday night regulars, but they're different people now. Jimmy Rodriguez from the factory brings his family instead of eating alone. The night shift nurses from Memorial Hospital laugh over dessert instead of gulping coffee between crises. The Silver Star has become what it was always meant to be, the heart of a community that refuses to be broken. Sloane finishes her math homework and slides into the booth next to Cordelia, who helps her practice reading from a chapter book about a girl who saves her village by being brave when bravery seems impossible. "Is that story true?" Sloane asks. Cordelia glances at Garrick, who's preparing the evening special with the same care he brings to everything that matters. The best stories usually are, sweetheart. Sometimes regular people do extraordinary things just by choosing to be kind when the world expects them to be cruel. As closing time approaches, Garrick performs his familiar routine. Grill off, coffee pot cleaned, cash drawer balanced to the penny. But now the routine includes counting donations for the community center and reviewing applications for the scholarship fund that helps local kids attend college. The last customer leaves at midnight, and Garrick locks the door behind Officer Holloway. Through the windows, Elizabeth's industrial landscape looks different now. Not abandoned, but patient. Waiting for the community center to open. For the new businesses that Cordelia's investment fund is bringing to the neighborhood. For the hope that grows like grass through concrete when people decide to nurture it. Sloane falls asleep in the car on the drive home, her head resting against the window. Garrick carries her upstairs to her bedroom, where acceptance letters from prestigious schools lie next to drawings she made of the Silver Star and all the people who make it special. He tucks her into bed and kisses her forehead, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Tomorrow she'll wake up in a world where kindness has consequences, where standing up to bullies creates ripples that become waves, where a single act of human decency can save lives and change everything. The Silver Star's neon sign continues to flicker in the distance, visible through Sloane's bedroom window. Red and blue light that promises warmth, food, and the radical act of treating strangers like family. A lighthouse for anyone brave enough to believe that ordinary people can create extraordinary change, one meal at a time. In a world that often rewards cruelty and selfishness, the Silver Star Diner stands as proof that kindness is not weakness. It's rebellion against a system that profits from human suffering. And sometimes, when you feed someone who has nothing, you discover they hold the keys to everything. The rebellion of kindness has won. What an incredible journey from a simple act of compassion to justice served. This story proves that when we choose humanity over profit, miracles unfold in ways we never expected. The Silver Star Diner became more than a restaurant. It became a symbol of hope. Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness create massive change? Share your stories in the comments below and inspire others to be the change they want to see. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss these powerful stories that remind us why compassion matters. Your engagement helps these messages of hope reach people who need to hear them most.